Hey, sorry to interrupt. Matt, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're perfect.
Okay. Elizabeth, we see you talking, we just can't hear you. I'm sorry.
You have no audio.
But welcome, everybody.
Welcome
Welcome.
to another episode of Technology Sucks. We hope you
Yeah.
guys are having fun
And I
today.
There you go. We got you now.
apologize for that. Oh, well, thank you so much for pointing that out, Mike. And sorry
All
for
good.
everyone who joined in and was confused on why it was so silent. Let's try this again. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Safety Brief. This month, as we reflect on the theme of thankfulness, we're focusing on something essential to our success in cybersecurity, and that's partnerships. Today, we'll be talking about why strong partnerships between managed service providers, MSPs, and managed security service providers, MSSPs, like BLOKWORX are crucial for effective threat management in today's landscape. So first, let's set the stage a little bit. Why is a strong partnership between MSPs and MSSPs so important in today's cybersecurity landscape? And how does BLOKWORX prioritize building and nurturing those relationships?
Yeah, Elizabeth, it's a great question. When it comes down to what tools, vendors, and platforms MSPs choose to partner with, it really comes down to trust. It comes down to what you expect as far as an end user experience. I'm speaking as an MSP in this role, uh, thinking, hey, what is going to save my engineer based time? What is going to provide measurable value that we can report on, KPIs, things like that. And where we've seen the landscape go is to a lot of bottom line focused price shopping solutions that are coming in at, you know, various price tiers, but are sacrificing a lot of the support experience or just overall user experience at that point, right? And so ultimately everything has cost. Nothing is cheaper on accident. And so there's just a lot of how do you say, there's a lot of alternatives being presented that have time tested maybe standards just built within it. So for example, with BLOKWORX, we have an entirely US based team. We're available 24/7 365 regardless of if our partners are or are not. They can always reach out to us, but they trust that ultimately that we're not just vetting the stack we provide them, we're not just managing it and configuring it, but that they have support when they need it. And that component in a service industry is critical. It's critical. And I think a lot of partners today have, certainly due to market trends and economics and everything else that drives it, there has been a settling for less when it comes to a quality support experience, a availability of engineers that, now you're going to have to email, now you have to go through a portal, and now you wait 5 to 7 days maybe to hear back, maybe 3 days, right? But ultimately the support experience is just the quality's been reduced. And so what does that translate to? That ultimately means maybe your user's down longer. Maybe the issue that your team's dealing with consumes more time and more days than you would be comfortable with. And ultimately, what we're talking about here is scalability, scalability on a trusted model. And so if you're an MSP and you're shopping around, obviously, when you look at partnerships, you want to first find a enterprise that aligns with your core values. We see a lot of people price shopping in the channel, and that specifically could certainly be one core value if the MSPs or MID's firm aim is to be the cheapest solution or the most low budget solution out there. And there's a need for that, right? Cybersecurity budget isn't one to be assumed and not available in the same amounts everywhere. But there is something to be said about ultimately partnering with an organization that believes what you believe about the user experience, about security, and certainly more to unpack there. But I would say specifically that's why the strong partnership is so important, because ultimately the end user pays the price if the solution or if the support experience is deprecated, whether or not the end user reaches out to that MSSP for support, because if it takes the MSP longer, it's supply and demand, right? And supply and demand. And so, how do we do that? How do we prioritize building those relationships? I think ultimately it starts with our why. It starts with the fact that we exist as a company and as a team to defend livelihoods. We know that there, at the end of every firewall connection, endpoint computer, and email account, there is somebody working to feed their family. And if they're not able to work, they're not able to feed their family. And so because of that impact, we take what we do very seriously. We take it close to heart. We obviously take all feedback. We're not perfect. We take all feedback close to heart, but we measure every piece of feedback through that mission. Ultimately, of like, hey, are we in this use case, if the tool fails, if policy doesn't update, if a process point is missed, whatever, are we defending livelihoods? The answer is no, then we're at fault. The answer is yes, then we're doing our job, right? But ultimately, you need to find a organization that not just has core values on a website, but you hear them in their vernacular often. You hear them in their everyday operations often. So, two-part answer, obviously, but I would say, ultimately, you are choosing a business partner when you do this, and the criteria through which you approach that process is directly reflected in your scalability.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. And it goes into something that we harp on a lot, or we've outlined a lot in a recent safety brief episode, which is vetting the partners that you're partnering with, making sure that they're following through those core values that they have on their website for clicks and things of that nature. So that is something really important, and we've definitely outlined that quite a bit here. So one of the other big challenges in cybersecurity is keeping up with the latest threats and trends. So how does BLOKWORX support partners in staying informed on the latest cybersecurity news and updates? And why is this essential for effective threat management? I can start by saying this podcast and live stream is one of the ways we keep our partners updated on events, trends, and even awareness. Matt, any other ways you'd like to highlight?
Defer to Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, as far as how we keep up with the latest trends, I know that, Matt and the entire team here is always on the lookout for new strains of attack methodologies. The more, one we've seen in the past 12 months, I think, is the migration of methodology for threat actors targeting email. And so they've kind of migrated away from embedding a link directly in the body of the email, because it's something that's been thwarted by many security platforms as of late. But I think, the evolution of putting attachments or links in the, putting a link in the attachment of an email, trying to obfuscate and anonymize the level of security that can scan. There are certain scanning engines that can go that deep. There are others that can't. They just look at the body of the email. But even more recently, the QR code, or quishing, I guess, is now what it's been maybe coined as, and these terms they pop up. It's pretty innovative, whoever comes up with these. But QR code phishing essentially is a QR code embedded in an email. It does the same exact thing as any old phishing email, which is redirect the user out of that to a faux login page or a fake authentication prompt. But how many pieces of technology can scan that QR code? It's difficult, because now we're talking about an image that routes to a link, and so if we can, try and anonymize that, threat actors being the people that are trying to, luckily our security engine's able to scan QR codes, able to index it in the same way that, we do with links, in the same way we do with attachments. And so, but again, being aware of these tactics is important, because then it causes us to examine the tools of the trade. And if the tools of the trade aren't able to get the job done, that is probably one of the biggest time-consuming efforts of this team, is, making sure that the tools of the trade can get the job done. And this rapidly changes. And so, we try to adapt and stay nimble as much as we can, but also making sure that we don't interrupt business as usual. We talked about scalability earlier, right? We can't migrate every 6 months, every 12 months. And so it's something that we certainly take into account. That, I know Matt is throwing darts at dartboards all day, and metaphorical use of that word, but, making sure that whatever we have can stop whatever's out there. But I also know that, it does come down to making sure that we pass on that knowledge to a degree to our partners, which, again, our partners rely on us to stay on top of it. So it's not as much like we're charging our partners to do the research, but it is our responsibility as a good partner to get some of this out to them, right? Case studies, stack v stack, all of this kind of stuff that's been created.
Yeah, another amazing thing Matt does is the BLOKWORX threat alerts. We do send those out to our partners via email, and we post those on our community portal as well. And of course, we have our newsletter as well that also can highlight any kind of cybersecurity news that has recently gone on, or any updates, like if we're having any kind of changes to the way that reporting's happening or anything of that nature. So having that open line of communication is definitely important. And having access to centralized resources can also make a huge difference in helping partners succeed. So in what ways can access to centralized resources like documentation, case studies, empower partners to deliver better security outcomes for their clients?
Knowledge is power. I mean, it's short and sweet. If you are not informed, you cannot make informed decisions. This, interestingly enough, came to light last night or early this morning as I was browsing through my favorite cesspool known as LinkedIn, where unfortunately top voices are equal to idiots. And I'm going to say that straight up. This is why LinkedIn actually is getting rid of the top voices category, because too many people with top voices were giving wrong information. The item that struck me particularly, I don't know, it pissed me off a little bit, was somebody saying that security is not even in the top 10 of things that companies should be focusing on.
Wow.
This came from somebody who is a CISO. Okay. The word security is in your job title. And you're saying security is not in the top 10. My rebuttal to this was, if you are in a role of leadership, knowledge has to also be present. You need to have knowledge in the form of a repository that you can work with. You need to have people who are making informed decisions that you are working with. If you don't have the knowledge to make the informed decision, you're going to make some really dumb decisions. Okay? Look at the help desk at the MGM. I'm sure that they are really happy that they didn't have a centralized repository in place to prevent that from happening. Let me tell you. So you have to have the knowledge in order to be able to really make the proper decisions, to make everything work. You need procedures, processes, everything, but there needs to be standards that are readily accessible for anybody to be able to look at. But more importantly, having that knowledge doesn't mean just having the knowledge documented. You need to have people that have the knowledge of themselves to know when they are outside of their level of capability. Just because something is documented doesn't mean a person is going to be able to handle that on their own if they've never done it before. So you need to have the knowledge within your employees for them to be able to say, hey, I don't know how to do this. I've never done it before. I've got a paper that says I can do this. But what if I do it wrong? I need somebody to guide me through this. That's the knowledge that you need. It's double-sided. You need to have it documented, but you need people that are smart enough to know, maybe I don't just take this for the words that are in place. Maybe there's outliers in this situation that need to be accounted for. It's not black and white. It's more gray, which is where I kind of like to live my life, is in the gray area. Everything is good and bad until you get caught. Just throw that out there.
Yeah, I think there's a valid point in that. Simply put, that, besides that post sounding like clickbait, because it's like, why in the world would you post something like that? Ultimately, I think it comes down to the fact that, content is one thing, but it needs to provide value, right? And I think right now we're in maybe a society and a culture that's so focused on maybe content or volume of content that value isn't even it's difficult to measure, admittedly, right? But ultimately, if it's not practical, if it's not telling a story or serving a purpose, then are we just making content for content's sake? Are we just writing words to say we wrote 10,000 words? And anybody that's done any essay or any academic long form paper knows what I'm talking about when I say working to meet the word count, right? Ultimately, you can have a word count and meet the minimum volume, but it can absolutely contribute zero or negative value, like at the end of the day. And so I think it's important to note that as advocates of information, which BLOKWORX certainly is, as a team that is constantly putting together content between the situation report that goes out every other Thursday, between the live stream that goes out every Thursday, between all of the content that we've parked in our community portal for our partners, it has to be valuable. So we may not be the first person to come out with a white paper on it, but I know Matt spent 40, 60, 80, 100 hours this past summer unpacking the deficiencies of CrowdStrike, unpacking the deficiencies of SentinelOne, unpacking the deficiencies of Bitdefender, unpacking the deficiencies of Huntress. Why? Because there's no content out there speaking honestly about these things. And again, if the content doesn't provide value and it's all just meatball charts and everybody's saying we're better, then what is it? Is it just the person with the most content wins? Is that the persuasion game we're playing? No, it has to be bona fide testing, scientific method. Here's how this did, good, bad, ugly, indifferent. Here's how this did, good, bad, ugly, indifferent. Here are the results. Examine for yourself. And that's the kind of content that you seldom see in the cybersecurity space because of entities like the Gartner Magic Quadrant, other things, right? Like I have been receiving emails for years of leave a feedback for this platform, get a $25 gift card. Those are paid, solicited reviews. Okay. So like we just need to acknowledge what we put in way of value in the credibility of the sources we look at, right? Everybody looks at Wikipedia and would attribute it to a level of, how do you say, credibility. Okay. Some people see it as higher, some people as lower. That's fine. However, when you get into scholarly peer-reviewed journals and articles, you cannot logically argue the quality of it. You can argue the viewpoint and the opinion, certainly, most definitely. But in cybersecurity, we found these trends where it's coming down to, the most content wins, the funniest looking logo wins, the quickest built website wins. I was, no joke, at an event a couple days ago where we were in an expo hall with thousands of booths, right? And the booth and the website looked like it was stood up 24 hours before the event, right? And it was very templated. It was what it was. It was a very simple message. Not bashing the booth. Innovation and competition is good. But it really comes down to, again, quality over volume, and volume being quantity, quality over quantity. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to, as BLOKWORX, make sure that what we're providing in way of content, we may not be the first to the punch on the release of a breach or a brief on a threat, but you better believe when it's published, it's sound, good research and testing. And that's what our partners have come to appreciate about us. That, again, similar to Apple, if you are an Apple Android zealot, shelve it for a minute. Apple's business methodology has never been to be the first to the punch. It's when they deliver it, it's a refined, cohesive element in their ecosystem, right? And how fast you innovate is variable based on methodology, right? You look at Google Maps versus Apple Maps. Apple Maps sucked for the first few years it released. Some would say, watching this, it still sucks.
You mean you didn't want to have to go through Mexico when you go from Texas to Florida?
If you prefer the scenic route, Apple Maps is your jam, right? And so, but ultimately, the why that is worth investigating, right? Google Maps crowdsourced, pulled user data live to correct their roads, to correct their routes, to correct all of that. Some would say, I am totally fine with consenting to that if it makes the platform better. The beautiful thing about Apple is they've made that a toggle since Apple Maps was released. And now Google has as well, mind you, to a degree. But the interesting component is people would say, well, Google Maps is better than Apple Maps. Few people ask why. And so again, as you're looking at content, as you're looking at libraries, there are thousands of threat reports that will come out, predictions for 2025, etc. Just be careful what you're ingesting. And that goes for any platform of any subject matter. Be mindful of what you're ingesting, who you're ingesting it from, and be skeptical of BLOKWORX, no doubt. But ultimately, there could be a motive behind the messaging. And there most often always is a motive behind the messaging. But ultimately, look for those that are providing educational value and telling you what exists rather than what to think. Right.
The other major thing is, as you mentioned, we may not come out with it right away saying, all the details about a breach. We will notify people that we are aware of certain breaches that have occurred. We will basically allude to the fact that further research will be brought out about it. The key factor is we will mention that we are able to prevent that and that our customers are safe. We will provide the affirmation and the confirmation that our customers are safe first and foremost, because that's the important thing. Nobody gives a crap about the details until they know they're safe. This is why you'll notice with other vendors, they will try to get as much information out there as they humanly can for everybody, but they avoid giving you a status of whether or not they prevent the issue in the first place. And it's because their goal is to inundate you with so much information that by the time you get back to asking that question, they can say, oh, yeah, we're good with that, as they look over to their development team and say, you guys put that in yesterday, right? Because they generally have a lag time behind that. You have to see something, you have to test it, they have to build it, then they have to deploy it. And in the case of CrowdStrike, they have to blue screen your machine, roll it back, and then, eventually get it out there the right way. Sorry, I haven't taken a shot at anybody in like the last 30 seconds. I have to, I have to fire around once in a while.
Speaking of that, though, it goes into even how we go about doing our updates. And not only are we super, I guess, slower with our documentation, but also with any kind of changes or updates that we make, because we don't want to release anything that's going to break or that's going to cause further issues. We test everything fully. I don't know if you've ever waited for a video game to come out for 6 years and it comes out and it has all these bugs. And
Grand Theft Auto 6.
Next week we're going to fix this. Next week we're going to fix that. Oh, there's a bug here. There's a bug there. Well, there's a process that can be done prior to, shipping things like that to make sure that there are no issues. So before we put out any kind of documentation, we do the internal testing first. Like Mike said, and I love that you highlighted that we may not be the first to the punch, but when we do produce that content, it's true, clear content. And like Matt said, we're providing peace of mind to our partners rather than scaring our partners or scaring our clients into wanting to get on more calls, or do I need this? Do I need that? A lot of companies use attacks or 0 days as a sales tactic, and it's sad to see. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
You mentioned our upgrade process, and I don't like the word slow because it's not slow, it's meticulous.
Yeah.
We are extremely meticulous about how we do our upgrade process. We make sure that we push it out to all of our machines internally first. We eat our own dog food, as you should. A certain other vendor didn't do that. Look what happened. Many questions arose about why there was no internal testing done before something of that nature was pushed out. We work with vendors that do the same thing. Before they release large-scale updates, they have their own release process that they go through. They do internal and early access. Early access are people that volunteer in knowing there could be potential issues. They do this for the betterment of the product. We have the same thing that we have the ability to do. We have certain people that have said, I want this. We'll work with them and we'll get that to them. We have the capability to control the rollout for however we want it. Then we have a phased rollout once we get through that part to ensure that we're not sending it to everybody all at once. And if all hell breaks loose, we have a way to turn off the faucet and say, okay, we can fix this. It went to 10% of our environment and we saw an issue with, 0.02%. Let's figure out why those had an issue, prevent that in the next part of the rollout. Ensuring that you guys aren't having to worry about what's coming down the pipeline. You can focus on the things that are actually important. If you, as an MSP, were focusing on all the individual details about what could possibly happen, you would never be looking forward at how do you grow.
Yeah.
And it's an impossibility. You'd spend all of your time doing everything. It's the equivalence of these one-man MSPs that say, I can do everything. Really? When do you sleep? Because you're not doing something when you sleep. You're there 24/7, 365? Okay, well, when you sleep, you're technically not adhering to what you've told your customers. That's why, touching back on the first question of why is a relationship so valuable? Because you can live up to those promises that you gave to customers. Having a partner that you can work with that has the integrity that BLOKWORX has means that you can fulfill all of your obligations and keep your promises and know that you're giving your customers the best possible option for security and safety. It's peace of mind in a world that, let's be honest, Giant Meteor is looking like a viable option. Its running mate is Cthulhu. Take your pick.
Well, to switch things up a little bit, another thing we always harp on is the fact that continuous learning is key in this field. So how do training classes and constant awareness initiatives play a role in strengthening partner capabilities? And how is BLOKWORX working to make these resources more accessible?
I'll give you an example of how it doesn't work, and then Mike can go into how it does work.
Okay.
So I worked at a very large company before. They had a lovely red logo that looked like an M, and as I've mentioned before, their leader was one elusive gringo. If you don't know the company based on those clues, I'm sorry, there is no saving you. I cannot help you with that. However, I can tell you that there were a number of times that we would go through awareness training for security. We were a security company. You'd think that awareness would have been top of mind. It wasn't. The only reason that the security awareness was passed was because people would tell us ahead of time, this is what you're going to see. Don't click on it. If they didn't say that, on average, 60 to 80% of each department failed the security training. That's pretty bad given that it's a security company. So that's how it doesn't work. It doesn't work when you tell people what to look for. The intent of ongoing training or those kinds of campaigns is to see where you're failing so you can fix it. If you're telling people and there's no failure rate, then what happens when there's an actual threat that they're not aware of and they click on it? Then you've got an entirely different situation on your hand that some proper education, continuing awareness would have potentially been able to weed out, or you would hope it would, theoretically.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because, something that you might keep in the back of your mind is if you're not aware of when these phishing tests are taking place, maybe you as an end user are being more aware of each and every single email because you don't know if it's a phishing test. Are there any kind of, penalties if you are caught and things of that nature? So, it kind of puts your end users on their toes a little bit more if you don't tell them when these are happening. And it'll keep you safer in the end of the day.
End users, I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip here. Do you want to pass your security training all the time? Just don't ever open your email.
Don't
Depends on
follow
team
his
unemployment
guidance.
over here. That's great. Dude.
I mean, am I wrong?
Pom-poms and everything.
Am I
It's
wrong?
good.
If you don't open your email, there
You
is
can't get
no
in
chance
trouble
that
if you
malicious
don't go
email
to
will
work.
impact you.
Yeah. For those that do need to feed their families, you know. No, I think ultimately, you know, we're in a unique space where we need to educate first our partners on a certain way of a frame of thought around prevention before they could ever maybe put credibility in the platforms we use and the services we offer, et cetera. So it's almost a two-part approach, but we've released really 100 level courses that are, very short in duration, but ultimately aimed at education to say, hey, here's some talk tracks. Here's how to communicate these things to everyday users in an ingestible manner, because everyday users don't speak ones and zeros. They don't know binary. They don't know deep learning, machine learning, and that's okay. That's not their profession. That's not what they show up and go to work and do every day. And so ultimately what we need to do is first serve them. And the way we do that is communicating the value in a way that makes sense. And so, we've evolved our reporting over the past 4 years. I think this year was leaps and bounds better than last, which is always the aim. But sometimes the product. But no, our reporting is really, really cohesive in a way that, it takes network connections and puts them on a map so that IP addresses may be hieroglyphics to some users, but they can understand a map. They could see, hey, here's where you all are trying to log in. Here's where bad guys are trying to log in. We stop those. We let you do business. That's good security, right? And so, but finding ways to weave those messages for the end user are important, because ultimately they're the ones paying for it. They're the ones paying for it and being promised that they will be secure they are paying, and their product that they're receiving is security. And it's a very unique product to deliver, because there's a lot of acronyms in the space. There's a lot of people saying the same things, but it's not as measurable as you purchase lawn service. You go outside, you see your grass cut. I received lawn service, right? And so security it requires a level of vigilance that you may always not see. It requires a level of tuning that you may not always see, but the end result should reflect the work, the time, the effort, and everything put in. And so, again, the way I kind of equate it is, the difference between $100 and $1,000 tattoo, and you just look at it and you can tell, right? And so, ultimately, I think it comes down to making sure that we create education paths, not just for end users, but for engineers that have to respond to these user requests. But the neat thing about our model is that we really try to reduce the lift of existing staff and keeping them in place for their intended function and use, and giving them time back in their day, right? We're not a displacement solution. We don't seek to displace staff, but rather optimize swim lanes of responsibility and deliver a better product overall. And so, yeah, it definitely starts with education.
Thank you for that. So lastly, to close us off today, let's look at a bigger picture. Can you give us a quick overview of the current partner enhancement program and initiatives that BLOKWORX offers? And are there any new developments or upcoming features we should be excited about?
We have a portal.
We have multiple. We have portals. I think this year has been the year of portals. I mean, if you've played the game, if you
suck it, Valve, we have more portals than you.
There's portals everywhere, right? And I say that in all jest, but now we've stood up 3 primary spaces for our partners to get value from. One is a community portal driven to do just that, build community around a cause. And again, it starts with that frame of mind that says prevention is possible, and then prevention can be profitable, right? You can sell this as a service and make a living off of it, and that it perpetuates trust. That ultimately that is the best way to do business. And so with that, we've created a community space. Think of a sanctified Reddit and learning platform kind of meshed into one. And so it's really neat space. We have partners sharing, marketing campaigns, ideas, feedback, what's working, what's not working, all in a single ecosystem. It's pretty incredible in that community-oriented approach. We have a service portal obviously for the sake of being able to more seamlessly track support tickets and onboardings and projects, and especially in the MSP space, you can have 5 or 12 different tasks going on simultaneously for 5 or 10 different clients, because in the space, you're not just an IT provider for one company, right? If only it was that easy to some degree. And I'm not saying that's easy, but I've worked in both camps, and man, in the MSP space, do you learn a lot, but you will pay for it in sweat equity. You will pay for it in sweat equity. You will sacrifice your sleep, sacrifice your time, but you're learning at an unprecedented amount because you're managing so many diverse environments. And so we've created the service portal to give back to our partner engineers to make their life easier. And then most recently, as I mentioned, the reporting portal is really the customer success advocate, the account manager's promised land, right? It's where they can go now and log in on their own and receive really, really tenable, really, really practical reports backed with live telemetry from the services they subscribe to. Currently, we have endpoint and firewall data piping into there, and there's plans to obviously expand it. But as far as 2024 goes, definitely the year of the portals. Yeah, if we had a calendar we'd release for 2025, there'd probably be some portals on the calendar, just to be like, more portals, please.
That's a good idea. Can we release a portals advent calendar?
We may, yeah, and you get a promo code for a piece of chocolate in each portal. If you find inspect the code and you find it, there are some fun ways to waste time. Like
follow-up question: where can somebody get their hands on this chocolate?
I'm no expert, but most of the time your local grocery store will sell some chocolate. But
yeah,
I respect those that don't consume chocolate, and I align myself with those that consume chocolate. And so, I'm in that camp. I'm definitely in that camp.
In 5 seconds.
Good times. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the fun part about the safety brief. You could show up, wanting to learn about cybersecurity, and we're just talking about go get your Halloween candy on sale. That's it. That's really the message we have for you.
Hey, that is the best day of the year, man. November 1st.
Dude, 90% off? Come on.
Right?
We're talking about cost. I'm definitely cutting costs on candy, but wherever we could save it, we could save it.
Yeah, that's called perfection right there.
Top tier content.
It's just like Easter, man. You go the day after Easter, it's also 90% off. You can literally set yourself up for an entire year going the day after a holiday and just picking up candy.
You should put that Halloween candy in the Christmas stockings and call it good.
Oh, you could. Everyone's going to wonder why they're getting pumpkins, but you know what? It tastes the same.
Wait, people could have done that and they've been giving me like 5-year-old Peeps packages? Really?
Dude, Peeps it's like a lot of sugar.
Yeah, I know. Peeps
a lot of sugar by a lot of sugar.
From being a squishy sugar candy to being a deadly weapon within 6 months if you don't eat them.
Oh man! Roll the clip on how did we get here, and then
I have no earthly idea. I'm here. That's how we got here. There you go. Yeah. You can blame me.
But
yeah, to kind of close things off, as Mike outlined, BLOKWORX has been pretty busy this past year, providing more features and things of that nature for our partners. So a huge shout out to the entire BLOKWORX team for working endlessly and diligently on putting all these portals together and making the lives of our partners better each day. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Safety Brief, and a big thank you to our team members, Mike and Matt, for joining us today and breaking down this topic. Dive deeper into this discussion and explore these topics in more detail. Be sure to head over to BLOKWORX.com to review our latest blog on this discussion. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and remember, in cybersecurity, we're stronger together. Stay frosty.
Thanks all.